Welcome to Cedars Hall and welcome to Wells, England's smallest city and home to a festival of literature run entirely by volunteers, which provides financial support to local schools and colleges. This is our 28th festival. We hope you enjoy it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this session of the Wells Festival of Literature. It's our competitions afternoon, as you know. Especially welcome to see you here under the present circumstances. We're also welcoming audiences from across the world who are live streaming this session, about another 70 or 80 people, I believe. And we welcome them in particular. The competitions continue to grow. Over 1,000 poems were submitted this year. Maybe lockdown has given people extra time. And across the 4 competitions, we have over nearly 150 entries from countries outside the 4 UK countries. Indeed, 26 different countries are represented. And I thought you might be interested to know where our spread has got to. We've had entries from Iran, Tobago, USA, Australia, Hong Kong, Canada, Russia, Cyprus, Italy, Belgium, Poland, Sweden, Malta, Denmark, Norway, Spain, France, Mexico, Turkey, Malaysia, New Zealand, Morocco, Uganda, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa. So welcome all of those who are listening in. We've also increased the number of submissions in the short story competition. Over 370 short stories were submitted this year, and 150 books for children, which is very, very encouraging, particularly in these difficult times in the world. It's good to know that there's a spreading worldwide unity of poetry and literature. So to the order of events, very briefly. First, we will read the shortlisted poems of the young poets. I hope you've all got your booklets with them in so you can follow. They will not be read in numerical order, but our team of readers, Pamela, Neil and Jenny, who are down here, will introduce and say which number and the title of each one so you can follow as we go through. When those poems have been read, our judge, Victoria Bully, will speak to the competition. I'll introduce her and award the prizes. Then about 3 o'clock, maybe a bit before, whatever, we'll have a short pause, not a break, so please don't leave your seats unless you are obliged to for various reasons. And then we'll go straight on with the open poetry competition. And the format will be much the same. Our 3 readers will read them. It's one of the drawbacks this year. We can't ask the individual poets to come up onto the stage and read their own poems because of the COVID restrictions. But they will read them, again announcing which ones they are reading as they go. In order to save time, please, when the poems are read, the shortlisted ones in both competitions, don't clap at the end of each poem, if you would. If you would be kind and leave your applause until the end of the young poet's reading and the end of the open poetry reading. And that will save us some time because there's a lot to get through. Then approximately about 4 o'clock, that will get us to, more, give or take. We will then have a proper break where you can go to the loo or get refreshments outside. And Andy will tell you what stage we have to come back in again. We will then have the prize giving for these 3 competitions, starting with the poetry with Sean Boridel, then the short story one with Duncan Mitchell, and then the books for children with Fleur Hitchcock. So, without more ado, and with thanks to our sponsors, the Mendip Ladies Group, for sponsoring the Young Poets, the shortlisted Young Poets readings, please.
Poem number 2, Ancestors, by Michael Scaravato Grant. What is heaven but this? These trees of tourmaline which arch to hide the azure and ancient sky that flaunts obscenely a sparse and ethereal space seldom known to those below, staining your cheek like cathedral light which flickers as you twirl almost sacredly, arm outstretched, wrist curved, the Adam, a dervish, and laugh gently whilst I approach, and whirl in time. 2 young men entwined. Did our ancestors dance like this, in the same familiar air of their cliquish love, in which we are not, their bare feet striking the dry and searing ground in ecstasy on their humble land? Yours less humble than mine, but no less sweet nor cruel. And in the night, did the same moon gaze 1,000 years ago when the tethering gale bellowed and their temples rose beside them like sea fret? And when they prayed in 50 different tongues, did they dream of the ancient city like we dream of them and cry? Find me in the quarter where the bluebells grow, where the plaster Mary stands enwreathed with roses and the sallow smoke stings your eyes, and I'll love you as David loved Jonathan, as our ancestors loved. Poem number 3, Come In, the Water is Fine, by Archie Hamerton. In Amélie-les-Bains, the air is frighteningly clear and thoughts come with the hollow thrum of a theremin. I think to myself, spa towns are like Lourdes for the secular, built on baptismal waters, and hear Lautrec tut at my idealism and say, sure, LA is built on tar pits, Washington on swamps, there's Cherokee graves under Tampa, and crookback kings in car parks. They said Lake Avernus was the gaping mouth of hell, but I have sifted my feet in its waters and come back fine, save for my soles, a little scratched from stones beneath the surface. I find something more spiritual in the town piscine, in the Sisyphean cycle I performed to empty bleachers. Climb the diving board, arch into the flat green below, a lap to the end with chlorine in my nose, then haul myself onto the chip tiles, go again. Coming home from the pool, she cossets me, kisses the top of my head, and sniffs the chlorine aura like Catholic incense in great liquid gulps, as if she might inhale me into the root of her lungs.
I shall read poems number 1 and number 4. A Full House in Summer by Maeve Hayden. This day's end looks good on you with your new freckles and your eye smile. Look at us, cast in gold like saints, shimmering at the edges like spirits returned. Kiss us goodnight, son, before you sink and leave us to our laughter. Laughter that says, thank you for the happiness you brought me today, and I hope I know you forever. But even if we never know each other like this again, at least we did at one time. Let that be enough. The June darkness is sneaking up from the ground now. We'll need the candles to keep the midges away. I can still see the black caterpillars crawling about on the nettles and the butterflies flirting with each other, and the fragile poppy petals fallen about the mother stem like drops of blood willingly given. I can still see you in the grey air set against the white sky. I can still see you. Nowhere else will I find that deep-hearted peace. You know the one. When the house is full and you can't tell who is family, who is friend, and it doesn't matter who is family, who is friend. Nothing matters at all, except the sheer wondrous luck of waking up in the same world as you. Poem 4, Gain Speed on Success by Holly Rose. I want to be able to look my children in the eye and the future I wish to obtain, and tell them of the way that I pushed boundaries to make the world mine each day, to forge a place where I'm recognized as excelling in what I do best, kissing the words that flow from my pen while sparing my ego in jest. Mystery shrouds the map outlining the journey I should take from here, but walking blind thus far is how I have gained speed on success each year, as I touch my surroundings for the next opportunity to take a leap of faith into the unknown and plunge to the bottom of the ocean in search of a place to call home. When creating is all you know, all you have to rely on is your heart and your brain. Amongst the rejection and the turmoil, you must remain hopeful as much as remain sane. So I will swim through each tide to make proud what stands only as a pipe dream of possibility. For success tastes sweeter when meaning grounds it like an anchor, tempting you to test the limits of your abilities. Look them in the face and push harder, because in the eye of your enemy, the bottomless pit that only grows darker, is where you will find the vibrancy of the eye of opportunity.
I shall read 5 and 7. Growing Cold by Freya Thompson. Darling, dinner's on the table. Growing cold. Sauce splattered on our best porcelain, bone white. Potato skins puckering, the pale chicken, flesh drying out, a throne for the summer fly. And I, your bride, passing more midnight hours with a shrinking stomach, whilst yours stretches for the meal you eat with someone else. I bet she eats in minuscule mouthfuls, Michelin star, and you slobber too much for one bite, mouth wide open, grease spraying into your moustache. I cooked for you still, but darling, I am growing cold. Little Boy on the Train by Lauren Hollingsworth Smith. Thumb crooked on his lip, wet and gnarled like rippled bark, watching trees get sucked backwards. He's making fish and ladybirds from rivulets of rain, listening to the milk bottle rattle of the train. Then he's swallowed up by a black tunnel mouse. It's night time. It's night time. His head drops to his shoulder. On a puppet master's string, eyelids squeeze cheeks. He snorts in and whistles out, pretending he's in the land of Nod. The tunnel spits him out in a flash of light. Electric shock, sits bolt upright. It's daytime again.
Poem number 6, History by Phoebe Elms. History. There's many things said about me. I've been criticised, you best believe. They view me as passive to their every decree, whilst they forge my name in order to deceive. They alter and conceal their every flaw and exaggerate themselves to their own conceit. They use lies to gain power and outlaw. Injustice rampant, whilst having clubs for the elite. They shove my words to the back of the shelves, tie up my struggles and take my lips, using backs of others to elevate themselves, disallowing the truth into people's fingertips. They then blame me and say, history repeats, saying, lessons learned, but no changes made. Corrupt in every crevice till riots are in the streets. Brutalities reminiscent of the times of a slave trade. Why do they torment me in this way? Because they recognize the power I hold. Since knowledge empowers to their dismay, and I contain the stories yet untold. But I cannot make a difference alone. I cannot reverse myself without you. Don't let things go on just because it's prone, repetition for emphasis. No, we'll see it through. Don't silence the graves anymore. Allow me my voice through you. The truth is able to reach the heart's core with persistence. We'll make a breakthrough. I need you to listen to my voice, to uncover your brother's mystery, to stand together and make the choice, to hear the cry of history. Poem number 10, My Artist Villanelle, by Dominic Wells. They took away my artist and they gave me back a painter. What I had seen in her and loved, they could only see as madness. And so they tried to heal her, but they made her soul a stranger. Inside those eyes of hers, I could see sorrow, joy, and anger. Now when I look, I see an iris, and beyond it, there is nothing. They took away my artist, and they gave me back a painter. In her art, I saw real people, their pain and glee and temper. They danced across her pages, little bits of who she was. And so they tried to heal her, but they made her soul a stranger. Her faces lost their meaning and became just scratches on some paper. Those figures stayed so beautiful, but were still and had no heart. They took away my artist and they gave me back a painter. Art had been her hiding place, her shelter from every danger. But they stole from her the canvas and they stripped her paint away. And so they tried to heal her, but they made her soul a stranger. They took away my artist and they gave me back this painter. They tore apart her soul and they stitched it back together. Her passion, love, and sorrow were all taken, hidden, gone. And so they tried to heal her, but they made her soul their own.
I shall read poems 8 and 12. 8. Magritte's Lovers as Girls by Dana Elizabeth Collins. What I would give to love you in public, to stitch my side to yours with silk, thread my hand through yours till it's stuck, to become two enraptured gods in a diptych. I want to run through cities with you, travel the world with love songs in our throats. I want you to be my only threat, the metronome to my heart's tattoo. Instead, we'll kiss behind closed doors and sit apart while we're outside. I'll ask the sky and the thunderous moon when I can stop feeling guilty being yours. A moon-dusted whisper will send back a reply, a faint and hopeful soon. The Lighthouse by Alison Prendergast. The single temple to be appreciated, a tall, solid structure with only one keeper. A purpose, to serve, never to be debated, to protect, to warn, to illuminate. The very heart hosts the brightest light, a continuous rotation, guiding the lost, signaling safety and harbour nearby. The beam caressing the ocean's surface softly, the darkness never quenching the light. Birds fly high overhead, the waves below breaking to retreat and gather themselves once more, the surrounding sounds like a gasp of fresh air. The lighthouse embodied within us all.
Poem number 9, which is Mum and Dad's Room by Lib Lejeune. Seeking comfort, I walk barefoot on carpet to that childhood palace and Aladdin's cave with floorboards that croak and drawers that won't squeak if you know how to handle them. But now the light is brighter, reaches further, invades my old hiding places, even the smallest, saddest safing of spaces, pressed between a sheet of ice-cold radiator and the faded velvet of an armchair. It holds the twilight that I don't remember there. I was invisible there, swallowed by darkness, shielded from the honey light of the hallway. Voices stayed far away, closer to the dinner I could smell roasting, would come calling in a few minutes, where my peace would end, and I'd leave the spiders and the grit that sits between the carpet edge and the skirting board. The window panes are wrinkled now. The wardrobe's oak back won't give way to snow-kissed woodland. So I lie on the furthest side of the bed, my father's side of the bed, cradled in the mold of 26 years of weight. The duvet murmurs white noise like the ocean. It anchors my body like my mother's hand on my forehead each time I was sick. Your parents' arms can hold you if you let them. Two poems coming now. One is number 11, and the other is 15. The first one is Rechristening by Catherine Turner. She takes the name, tastes funny, the kind of funny without laughter, tastes bittersweet, a two-party compromise that satisfies all by pleasing none, tastes different, but promises same, an invisible name they can say, but not see. She holds the name, feels how light it is in her hands, unburdened by the weight of her history, hollow, feels it catch in her throat, choke her, just for a second, feels the name teeter on the crown of her head, unsteady and uncertain. She learns the name, looks at the little lines and the curly curves of its strange letters, looks at her red cardigan, her grey skirt, her black shoes, looks at the other girls she shares it. 3 in her class, 5 in her year, 1 in the mirror. 15. Vamp by Flaminia Luck. She wore the night like an evening gown, draped in darkness. She was out on the town in a dress of the blackest blue, indigo, violet, swished through the streets with the grace of a cat, the wings of a bat, searched the sky for the brightest stars and wore them as earrings to catch the gleam of the moon, which she wore under her skin like a light from within. She caught the glance of a bystander, an onlooker, who looked and saw a woman with an intimidating face, who wore cobwebs of lace on her sleeves and a necklace with the heart of former lovers like beads, bangles, silver, set with jet, black like death, whom she flirted with, teased and taunted. She haunted the city like a spectre, except that all who left her were doomed. A fate worse than death. She kissed as she killed, as the mark she left behind were the kind that meant you were ruined, ravaged by the lady of the night, who made lipstick from the blood of her victims as she kissed them good night.
Poem number 14, Under the Gates of Novgorod by Sam Holden. It's set in West Russia in 1242, when the Republic of Novgorod was Russia's window to the west. The Russian Orthodox city was defended by Prince Alexander Nevsky from invasion by mixed forces from the west, including Swedes and Danes. A militiaman recounts the experience. Under the gates of Novgorod, we took our plea, seen by all from within old Veliki. God above, so hear my oath, great patron, who with every glass I toast, Lord, protect our tender prince, guide his arm against those who'd harm Rurik's republic, from now to his last wince, to teach the Teutons the worth of steel that once did before the Mongols kneel. Undimmed and undeterred, Novgorod the Great stands, its forces magnificent, the militia's hearts at Nevsky's command. So with this pledge, we give ourselves, placing swords, axes, and pikes towards a worthy cause. In our honest hearts compelled, we'll follow him from the sacrosanct church to the bosom of the devil's perch. The Lord's with us, so let princes strike. No man starts blessed to enter heaven's height. Let him that stands with us this day take his collar, put it to God's work, in ranks resplendent in honour. Now, noble citizen and peasant alike, let's raise our shields, make menacing our valour, for Novgorod place our souls on the battlefield. For the great we rise, God-fearing in such pride, so in this demonstration, our worthiness we may in paradise stride. So it was so, that the militia would go and take battle with the Teutons, Livonians, Germans, and Danes, our feet labouring through panes of snow. My bootstrap broke on the way, you know. Poem number 16, So Lovely is the Loneliness, by Nathaniel Wheatcroft Brown. When I think of love, I no less dream of a body that has been hurt as much as mine. In this dream are splinters of unbecoming, sharp and committed to fracture my shell before it has chance to lift in search of other tears to dry. I no longer seal my breath as some might want me to. For the man to tell me of love in spells of healing is no man to admit the pain that comes with becoming. On the float of white rose petals, I might listen to the whisper, but I do not hear the sound. Perhaps the track of blades through my heart is the future working in me today, so that I may understand all his pain when my infant spirit rises to kiss his palm. I will whisper, yes. I will hold each part of him made in the darkness and prove that darkness as his beauty. When I think of love, I picture no one to heal what is torn within myself, but someone to offer a table so I may stitch those parts together again. And in the crescent of this stitching and the eye of the needle, I would too stitch my whole heart till it beat with the lake of all my days and nights. Maybe he does not need to be hurt. Maybe he needs to know what hurt feels like. For I am still a boy, wanting to know what that loneliness might feel like with another.
And finally, 13, to Jim the mackerel, who is being dissected during an examination. Due to under-practiced scalpel wielding, an overexcited interest in the unexplored, you are smeared across a chopping board, a jumbled jigsaw in a Tesco bag. Fluorescent science lab light glitters your underbelly. We look for answers in your innards, insight in your entrails. Forceps make fish guts whisper their slimy secrets. Eyes lost marbles roaming primary school playgrounds. If they glinted before with life, fishy wanderings, they do so no more. No more? Squinting, the waves on your skin, scales, you are carved of marble, glinting beneath examining eyes, have provided us with exam paper answers, Jim. Sorry it had to end this way. From tides and the deep, blue waves crested with foam and sunlight, or from playgrounds crafted of coral, or from shoals and seashells and sand, currents crossed by feather-like fins, to here, a carrier bag, a heap of dissected colleagues, stripped of dignity and organs. To Jim, the mackerel, I feel no guilt, no remorse. Heartless human omnivore, you see. Only a small thought, a short breath, for the freedom grown in fishy flesh. Caught you were, but aren't we all?
Thank you very much, readers. None of our winners are unfortunately here today, so there's nobody to stand and take applause. But we have our judge here today, Victoria Ajukwee, and I'm delighted to introduce her. She's a British-born Ghanaian poet, writer and artist, widely published in England and America. with work commissioned by the BBC and the Royal Academy of Arts. She's a former young Barbican poet and the director of Mother Tongue, a project exploring and promoting the indigenous language heritage of black poets. Victoria.
I just want to start by saying thank you to Wells Festival of Literature for having me, because this is the first time I've left London in really most of the year because of the situation that we're in right now. And it's really nice to feel that literature is still happening even in times such as these. So I really enjoyed reading the shortlisted poems, and it's been really amazing to hear them read again and to sort of think to myself, oh my goodness, like, you know, I wish I had these readings in my head as I was making my choices. And I agree with my choices still, but at the same time, I think it's worth saying that it's really inspiring to read this work. I think it's not easy, it must not be easy to be a young person in this world at this time when there is so little enthusiasm and optimism to be found looking to the future. But it's uplifting to read poems such as these and to feel that there is hope and that there is an insistence upon beauty and the will to create, even at times that are difficult. And in reading through them, I looked for poems that struck me as a famous poet once said, as making it new, because I think that's what we have to do right now at this time. We have to imagine forwards and make the world new. And the poems that I've chosen, I wish I could choose all of them, but the poems that I've chosen, the three of them, I felt really did something innovative in different ways, each of them. But all of them are exciting, and it's such a shame that I can't meet them today in person. I read a series of poems that were numbers and not names, so the names that I've heard today, the names of the poets, I've not heard before, so it's nice to meet them that way. So I'm going to now announce in reverse order my selections. So I'll start with third place. Let me get this one, it's right here. Which was lovely to hear this read. I chose this poem because I found it incredibly expansive, moving across geographies of both land and mind. It was incredibly sensuous, with a love of the richly embodied human experience. And so in third place, we have Come In, the Water's Fine. In second place is a poem that I chose because I felt that it spoke to the transformative capacities of love, affirming the human ability to endure suffering without losing sight of tenderness. I also felt that it played incredibly well with register. I never knew what this poem was going to do next. It made me feel incredibly fraught and heartbroken. Even to think that someone as young, I don't know how old they are, but I know they're young, as this, could be feeling this way, and then remembering that it is human to feel this way at whatever age. But yes, lines such as, perhaps the track of blades through my heart is the future working in me today, felt incredibly complex to me. And so, in second place is the poem, So Lovely is the Loneliness. And finally, in first place, I'll just look at my notes. It's wonderful to hear this read as well. This one stood out to me because it, I feel, is going in a direction that says to me that this poet has a voice that's formed quite well already. And it's very often that we have to fight. I think even in myself as a writer, it's very easy to find yourself writing and think, oh, I sound like something I've heard before. But I read this poem and I didn't think it sounded like anything I'd heard before. But even in its simplicity, the straightforwardness of the language, I think there are concepts and themes that are quite complex. So it kind of fools you a little bit. And I think there's a lot going on here that we might miss if we don't look closely, whether that's thinking about what it means to want to belong, but also to want to be one's full self, even at such a young age as being at school. And so in first place, without saying anything further, is the poem Rechristening. So my congratulations to all of the shortlisted poets, and I'm imagining their faces here. I don't know what they look like, but I'm trying to project and telepathically tell them well done. And of course to the three first, second and third winners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for your enthusiasm and encouraging support to our young poets, and to all of them for getting onto the shortlist and indeed taking part in the competition, and to you, the audience, for your support as well. We hope the young poets, which is part of the object of our competition, everywhere will be encouraged to write more and develop their art. I should have said that because they're not here, they will, of course, receive their certificates and prizes through the post. So that brings us to the end of the Young Poets competition, and we'll now just have a pause for a minute or two before we start the open poetry readings. Please remain in your seats unless you need to leave, and we'll start again in 2 or 3 minutes' time. Thank you very much. Well, now we come to the open poetry competition, and you've got your shortlists here. Jenny's asked me to say that for the competitors who aren't here, but who may be listening online, if they want a booklet of the shortlist, some of them haven't yet got it, I gather, please will you send Jenny Smith your email address and she can send them out to you. That's for the competitors. So now we come to the reading, and again we'll ask Pamela and Neil and Jenny to read the poems, and they will announce the names as before. And again, as before, please, if we can desist from clapping in between poems and applaud at the end, that would be helpful. I have to give 2 thank yous just before we start. The first is to the school for letting us have this magnificent venue, without which in these COVID times it really would be impossible to hold such an event. So thank you very much to Wells Cathedral School, and to our sponsors of the local poetry prize, Mary and Jörn Nielsen, who have sponsored that again this year. Thank them very much. So, to the readings of the shortlisted poems. Neil is going to start.
It's poem number 17, A Familiar Path. by Maggie Wadey. It's a familiar path, steep but not too much so. Only this time my wife has gone on ahead of me, moving away. She moves away so fast, impatient as always, wanting the view, wanting an answer, different from me, who never liked to think too much and have always relied in the past on my luck. But there's something odd about the here and now, something I've failed to notice or understand somehow. There should be cliffs with the sea on one side, bee sands behind us and the incoming tide rising. But what's rising now is darkness, not water, with my wife's frail figure in outline too near the top, moving away. She moves away so fast. And it's quite a balancing act up there with the wind off the sea and a heart-stopping drop, but on she goes with no thought of turning or stopping, of waiting for me. Soon she'll be over the hill and out of sight. Yes, there she goes, left leg up and over the stile. But wait a minute, that can't be right. There is no hill, no stile, only a carpeted flight of stairs. And my wife, like a tired old woman, is hitching up her plunge neck nightie and slowly climbing into bed. I can't fathom where I am. There's gravel crunching underfoot, and the wind that's blowing chill is in my heart, while she, with a groan of satisfaction, lets drop her earthly powers and sinks as low as she can go under the counterpane, pulling the bedclothes up to her nose till only her eyes show. But no, not bedclothes, 2 yards of turf. And as she does so, a strange, lost look comes on her face, a mixture of curiosity and disbelief, before earth covers her over, mouth, eyes and nose, her brow a pale glimmer, then all of her goes, and the grass, like her bedclothes, is dotted with flowers. Poem number 23, Dad listening to Yeno Yando playing Schubert, by Roger Elkin. The living room sofa throning him, his fingers riffling over the moquette as if he's putting together the sonata, his latest favourite, and he's humming. Not in harmony, more of a counterpoint and slightly off-key, an octave or so lower. So too is Yando, just a tad in front, shaping the CD's offering into perfected echo rather than afterthought. Dad reckons this Yando's a master at the ivories. Sad, the music, the subtle harmonies, the scales, turns, chords, the offbeat resolutions. So much incompletion, a longing like the missed chances, the lost opportunities. Those folk long gone. Remember Dad silently laughing at his friend's claim, "We all have choices." Daft that, son, he'd confided. Real daft. We didn't even have a piano.
I'll read poems 18 and 19. 18, Alive, by Elizabeth Rowe. Each lived hour serves to deepen acquaintance with mortality. Yet still, I fail to be alive to the essential, both within me and beyond. Today, I chose to follow a narrow sheep track, contouring the flank of green where granite moorland gentles into pasture. Without warning, Between one step and the next, ordinary time stood still, a single moment stretching to encompass the spacious fabric of existence. And in this pause, the blue of distance wrapped me like a soft shawl from Saharan. Leetwater was a blade of light that drove to my centre, and I knew the life of all that lies beyond the self had given me belonging. I reached the granite quarry, breathed sweetness of gorse flower, knelt to touch the earth. Easy to neglect on the uneven track the necessity of noticing, but to be alive is to give attention one moment at a time. To the crushed violet by my foot, those crazy wisps of cloud converging, a festival of skylarks somewhere in the dazzle, singing me home. Certain Events in Blackburn, Lancashire, 1967, by Sean Martin, which tells the remarkable rescue of a 17th century treasure by one of our greatest devotional writers. It was the year of holes in Lancashire, 4,000 plaguing Blackburn like some medieval miasma. But it was the year of fire also. One fire above all others in Blackburn that saw miracle. The kind saints had worked, a wonder to colour the leaves of annals, become a song in hearsay. On the allotments, such things were rumour, doubted at the gasworks, frankly disbelieved on recreation ground and railway station platform. It was this: a bonfire puffing at dusk like a Lowry smokestack, and someone, for reasons no reason could explain, noticed an old book through the smoke. A raft at sea in flame, leather covers alight, starting to buckle and crack. And that was the moment whose thoughts working through her. She reached into the fire to snatch it out, skin blistering as she stamped on flame, the quick-step hysterics of forgotten folk dances, or a Morris side stomp unknown on Blackburn's backfields, and thus the commentaries of heaven in Traherne's own hand were saved.
Poems number 20 and 22. Charleston by Ruth Dewhurst. Her colours fled into the walls, clinging to plaster. They chase memories out through the French windows. Hollyhocks dance in their wake, heads dipped in deference. And she sighs to think folk worship her here in all her ungodliness. The table, painted on a whim, becomes the centerpiece. She cannot control the narrative. Her life is set, silver-plated, by men drinking far better wine than ever poured from her hand. Resolute, she haunts the pond, admires the brazen carp gulping at life, black and orange against weeds. She could weave the colour, contrast into pattern, sharp enough to taste. She would add black tracing, like veins. It was always deliberate. That is what they do not understand. She made the house to move. Now rooms pickle in ribbon jars, sour poison at the dinner table, between the scented flowers. Poem 22, Cochineal by Aileen Ballantyne. My mother kept the small brown phial of cochineal on the top shelf of the larder. Brought it out once a year on my birthday to spell out the letters of my name in brilliant crimson icing. It was only when I reached my teens I knew the price of cochineal. So high, once they quoted it on the commodity exchange in Amsterdam and London. Carmine dye for the cardinal's robes, carmine for the king, carmine for the soldier, carmine for the palette of Michelangelo. Carmine dye from a female beetle, its scarlet hue a carousel of silken blood, traded on the triangle route for cinnamon and tamarinds and gold, for cargoed flesh of tall young slaves tethered in the hold. We make it as we made it then, crushing out the bright red stain for lipstick and for orange drinks, party cakes, and both this.
Poem number 24, Egyptian Dog Fox by Roger Elkin. Hotel Fort Arabesque, Makadi Bay, the Red Sea coast. Early dawn, just gone 4. Sun's orange-red penny blooding the horizon way out at sea. Not many folk around. The odd jogger, a groundsman dodging between sprinklers and hose, laundry lads laugh chatting as stacking the back of the Suzuki pickup. But still risky, this morning saunter, his paw pads daisy chaining together the skeletal empty sunbeds. So, breathes deep and squeeze eases beneath the wire screening to sidle beside the swimming pool's overflow. Sniffs a dribble, and, fish slippery, inches through the clipped bougainvillea shrubs, his muzzle pulling at leftovers, chicken scraps, waffles, candy wraps, anything. Coming clear, stands statuesque and declares himself full stretch. His ruffed coir pelt, suddenly sun-gilt and tipped with ginger. He lifts left forepaw to dangle at right angle, hefts neck and chest to hoist snout erect, ears fine-tuned to stirrings and eyes wadget tight, then trots across grass. Stops, again trots, delicately now, till dashing into a mad panic gambol dance. Balks, stone dead, periscopes head, then launches a 4-legged scimitar swish as high as mid-waist to land 80 at Scarab, not there. Sniffs and bounds into zigzagging sprint trips that lollop him off to safe haven of palms, where melds himself into vanishment. Lairs there with vixen and cubs, keeps generations alive on the myth kitty of Anubis and the want of tomorrows. His future is now. Poem number 26, Elephant in the Room by Mary White. The cupboard is barred by brittle bits of tape, the kind you'd use to seal an envelope or wrap a birthday gift, not keep something in or out, yet there it sits and has done 11 years since she shut something up, left it behind badly closed doors to seep, decay, a smell of damp permeating the room. Unread yellowed papers piling, while she sits further away each season, closer to the hall, opposite half-drawn curtains, a cracked leather bag filled, waiting, the same dank mustiness around its strap, curled on the carpet, cold, dead, snake flaking skin, scale by scale, tongue forked in her lap.
I read poems 25 and 27. 25 describes how Roman and Celt and Saxon and Viking gradually made a language and a land and a people that we can begin to recognize as English. English by Leslie Saunders. In the Latin days, when scholar poets were inventing the season of spring, the bare young trees of the vernacular began to glisten with runes and thorns grafted on the native stock by incomers from the Netherlands. Secular verses planted in the borders guarding St. John's magisterial in principio erat verbum. Florid visions of eagle and wild boar dipped in local colour, rose red and greenwood, goldenrod and foxglove. Although the mornings were bitter still, and mist hung in their lanes like the rags of a lost legion's banner, and their sparrows were silent, sleeping, this was the dream before waking. Ashen light curtsying through the rafters, a solitary blackbird crying the alarm. Oh yes, and then the brazen chanticleer gathering the dawn into a wind-borne story of whale road and beewolf, cuckoo and cowherd and our daily bread. And at last the oak trees opening wide the great libraries of their leaves, pastoral shade for alle Goddess folk in Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria and Kent. At 27, Exhumation by Jim Green is a poem about a very great but seriously eccentric Viennese composer. I imagine it in black and white, the muted palette of the third man's unforgettable final shot. Camera staring down a tree-shadowed avenue in central Friedhof, Vienna. Behind the trees, obelisks and ivy, the only movement, leaves like tears, falling one by one towards the ground already filled by a silent 3 million. And a woman's tiny figure growing slowly larger, eyes ahead, as she nears and then walks past Joseph Cotton and out of shot. More dead than 3 million others, he lights a cigarette and throws the match away into the summer solstice of 1888, where in another Viennese cemetery, in something closer now to sepia, a shy, stocky man in a suit looking like it was made from a blanket leans trembling over an opening coffin. Although today surrounded by formal frock coats, and just as he couldn't with a younger corpse later that year, he can't restrain himself from reaching in and picking up what remains of Beethoven's skull. To the Times correspondent, he was a bystander. And in wonder, not accusation, I have long wanted to break the leaf-rustle silence of this place and ask the bystander, who is, in fact, Anton Bruckner, some questions. How many cobbles did you count this morning as you made your awkward way along the Teschnergasse? What might be the average age of the teenage girls you proposed but never spoke to? Is your suit, in fact, made from the stuff of a blanket? What sequestered counterpoint do you believe rubs off from fingering and kissing Franz and Ludwig's dust? Are you a simpleton or a genius? And how have you hidden the answers in the gleaming black discs that slide into my hand like flattened planets from the tight-packed thin graves, the Deutsche Grammophon Gesellschaft of my dad's stubbornly alphabetical collection?
Poems 28 and 32. Feathers by Cindy Vincent. I stepped down from the train and while minding the gap, almost trod on a bird on the platform, dead, neck folded flat, head tucked into the stilled curve of its breast. Its soul had left its nest and fled skyward, leaving its body amidst a blizzard of feathers, kicked up by commuters. They frosted the salted pavement in numbers to suggest a flock. A shock impact must have carried it off, but left it snowflake perfect, complete in pigeon detail. Of so many adornments bereft it remained, yet itself. I thought of my grandmother in later life, in look and manner intact, polished shoes, hair exact, familiar scarf, still present laugh, yet shedding memories, losing her stories until she was lost among those soft losses. I see her static in their scattered warmths. I try to gather them, but the breeze disperses the names, the faces, the traces of her spirit. Which is the feather that took her with it? I use it to write her verses. In the shade of almond, dawn glacier. In the almond's leopard shade, flung by a noon-high sun, in the rib shade of coconuts, their stick trunks hydra-headed, the skeletal forms of sun-bleached loungers, as neglected as tourism on our island. 20 years passed. The point was greened by elm and almond. Now the baked white roofs of villas, bunched tight on their fragment of coast. Pools green as grazing iguanas or the grass they glide through. Pools where sable grackles stand, ankle deep on the infinity edge, and squat, flap, then fluff dry on the leprous branch of sea grape, shedding its mottled and lichen orange skin in the salt slap of southern Atlantic. Which toppled one? Its knotty trunk, horizontal its branches, half plunged into sand, half grabbing sky. Outside the toothless lagoon mouth of Petit Trou, a ferry bucks the swell, kicking a crazy wake before it slows into the channel, crossing stilted ribs of 15 men-o'-war sunk in 1677. Remembered now in the almond's leopard shade.
We missed 21. Somebody reading 21.
Me. I'll read 21 and 29. 21. City of Nectar by Ruth Sharman. Madurai showered with nectar from Shiva's locks, though not a flower in sight, not even a garland maker by the temple, only paintings on a bus. This city may be a little crazy, but it's Tamil Nadu's soul, the guidebooks stress, and I'm sad we're going so soon, saying goodbye to the Hall of 1,000 Pillars with its carvings of fish and fornicating monkeys, mythical lions, manes radiating like the sun's rays, and serpents twined together, meeting mouth to mouth. I'm sad we'll miss the last and best puja of the day, when Shiva, the beauteous lord, is carried to the bedchamber of his bride. It's not drums I remember, or horns, or clouds of incense, priests waving fans of peacock feathers to keep the chariot cool. When I think of Madurai, I'll see rivers of traffic from the hotel rooftop, Christine covering her ears as she weaves through the crowds, and that one-armed man standing in the middle of the busy street, feeding a starving cow the remains of his supper. And 29, From Mudgley to the Sunset by Ruth Nadold. From Mudgley to the sunset is immeasurable miles. From the sunset to the stars is the dreams of a child. As the leaves of autumn fall with hardly a sound, from the sunset to Mudgley is such sacred ground. The wind in the treetops, the moon in the cloud, the fool on the road singing out loud, the rabbit, the torchlight, two dogs on a chain, from Mudgley to the sunset and back to Mudgley again. Such joy for the peasant. Is it the same for a king? This mould of autumn, night's dark coming in, the bitter chill of winter, but then again the spring. From the sunset to Mudgley is a marvelous thing.
Poem number 30, Hands in the Sistine Chapel by Nico Mann. Fingertips tentative early that morning, you tested the fresh plaster to know if your painting could begin. Too soon. It yielded to your touch, and for a moment, to seek support perhaps, or simply to pause for thought, you rested your whole hand there. And in that moment of repose, you knew the skewed perspective you would use to feign volume for the viewer far below, who'd see two hands outstretched to strike the arc light of creation. I stood there once, high up on the restorer's scaffold. I saw the handprint that you left that day, and at arm's length I felt your touch. Now, as I gaze upwards from the marble floor, all I can see is the hand of the Master in his image of the finger of God. Poem number 31, Harlan Bay by Andrew Miller. You like to stand beside me in the breakers, the surf rushing over you, laughing and pointing as each new wave rises. Yesterday, we played in the sea until you were blue with cold, and every time I tried to take you home, you pulled free and ran back to the water, eager for more. I had to pick you up and carry you off as you struggled in my arms and cried out through chattering teeth, "The sea! The sea!" You were soon sitting happily by the fire, feeding imaginary biscuits to your plastic piggy. But I heard you cry out in your sleep that night in a voice as plaintive as the song of a landlocked gull, "The sea! The sea!" I remember the moment that you came into this world, wet from that other ocean. I remember how your tiny fists clenched as you gave voice to your first homeward cry, and you reached out to grab hold of my finger, squeezing it so tightly that salt water ran from my eyes. You and your sister, 2 months premature, tiny as baby rabbits sealed into electric wombs. We put our hands through the walls and whispered to you and felt the oceans inside of you and your hearts bobbing like leaves in the wind. Hours later, walking dazed through the driftwood of a hospital Saturday night, past tired-eyed nurses and surly drunks, hollowed-out junkies and patient sufferers, I felt a tenderness for every breathing thing, for every rock and star and blade of grass. All were born and all will die. Words struggled to map the shape of love, for it is eternally entwined, no separation between the newborn heart and the tide of the world.
Page 35 and 36. Sorry, poem 35 and 36. First one is Maxgate, which of course was Thomas Hardy's house. This is by Virginia Astley. Something about watching the pine cones as they caught on last night's fire took me back to Rainbarrow, and by association to the house you built on the edge of town, to my last day when, taking a break from cleaning, I sat at your polished desk and, overlooking the garden, picked up my pen and wrote. Sometimes in winter, with the fire dying and the black outside, I thought I could see the red eyes of a deer looking in. And there were times I'd linger in the woodlander's room, waiting for Grace and Giles to appear on the contour of a faraway hill, waving to you, you thinking what a couple they'd make. I remember how the house felt in the evenings after the visitors left, like a child's snowstorm that had been shaken, but how gradually everything would settle, and I turned out the lights, closed the doors, only the clock ticking in the hall. Strange now, as I lie in the dark, in the cool of the night, listening to the tawny owls calling, thinking of your empty house, its empty beds growing colder. Orpheus in the Classroom by Elizabeth Porter. The Italian boys on a one-way exchange disturbed our summer. We hadn't expected blonde hair, blue eyes, blue as the jeans they wore to lessons. Their white shirts dazzled, reflecting the sunlight. We sulked and sweltered in uniform. They were louche. They swaggered. They were way too happy, laughing in a corner of the grey schoolyard. They blatantly smoked. The teachers were speechless. A year or so later, Sir pressed play on a hissing cassette, told us to listen. One of those boys, compliant after all, his voice like honey falling from a spoon. He brought our Latin text to life, reciting the lines we thought we knew. The snake at her ankle, descent, pursuit, and heartless warning, don't look back. Who doesn't look back? He astonished us, those chiding consonants when he spoke her name. Eurydice, Eurydice, beseeching his lover not to forsake him, as this disembodied voice unspooled. We understood, or so we thought, how love and song bring back the dead. We didn't learn. We were too young.
Poem number 33, Lights Out by Roger Adams. I climb these stairs, hand on the oak rail shaped by a skilled craftsman, polished by generations of other hands, the wood rounded and solid as a sculptured arm, but always warm under the palm. Behind me, doors locked, lights out, the downstairs rooms in darkness indistinguishable from what they were 100 years ago, their forms as constant as the bricks and stone that frame them. Only the human clutter changes, the soft tissue of existence. And when the lights go out, another step towards the dark, another notch is marked along the palmer's staff. Each room shut foreshadows age's deprivations, the countries unattainable, consigned to memory or never known. the mountains only seen, no longer trodden, the slow but still perceptible reduction of horizons as one's own garden becomes an alien territory, and then the outer rooms, these stairs and handrail, until all senses are confined, as birth, within the limits of a bed. Poem number 34, Maundy, by Jim Green. Servants no longer, but friends. No use just saying it, so he got down with a bowl and a towel to wash everyone's feet, splashing the water that dissolved the rock of Peter's little ego. Never mind a scooped handful. Break over me in wave after wave. Make me nothing but ocean. Once, on a bare outcrop off the coast of Cork, we gathered nervously with bowls as Thursday darkened. An islandman had walked, halting and awkward, in his funeral suit, through black peat, through the day, through his life, to sit down bemused in our small circle around the sea, trembling in a chipped enamel bowl. The peat from his lowered foot turned the water black. Cautiously, we splashed and scooped and patted each other dry. Afterwards, we sat surprised by the circle of white petals spread beneath us on the floor. This night at 8, the empty moment explodes into chapped hands clapping all down the street, rolling away from us like the sea echoing along invisible roads. Stunned suddenly, where we stand, we beat our washed hands together and stare in wonder, watching them slowly turn into other people's feet.
I'll read 37 and 40. 37, Restoring Our Parents' Grave by Stephen Lloyd. From above, we were kids colouring at the kitchen table, 3 heads propped together, propped on palms, 3 forearms, and 3 careful pens steady between the lines. From below, we were well-loved faces leaning close, with eyes that focused elsewhere, and hands moving about some subtle business, like the surgeon moving dimly behind the bending light. At the cold stone face, the exercise of hand and eye became a bond of grief, and the wakened letters of their names became our names, and the stone our window. And what was there to see? Below, 2 cans of dust that once were love. Above, the blackbird in the shady yew, the high and urgent aeroplane, and in reflection, we 3 scribblers leaning at our tears. And 40, The Aunt of Shimizu by Noriko Konnuma. At your burial, I saw a black swallowtail. The swallowtail, a common butterfly in Japan, slowly so and elegantly flew onto the humid breeze. I was thinking of you, Aunt Setsu. It was a hot midsummer day, and a typhoon rain had just started to fall in the afternoon. My mother phoned me and said that you had died from pneumonia. On the same day, I caught a train to Shimizu. Mount Fuji looks spectacular there. They speak different dialect, and warm climate and much slower pace of life cultivated your magnanimous mind. Shimizu sounds sweet to my ears. Many childhood summers were spent there, and big lavish dinners were always served with your cheerful laughter. Fond memories about you converge into the place name, Shimizu, because you liked me, cared about me. I want to think that I knew and understood you. At your burial, the butterfly flew over your new grave. Small procession of the mourners stood in front of a cove, paid no attention to the butterfly as they were busy mourning. Only I was looking skywards. Cicadas of the mid-August cried and cried, their regular pulsations echoed by the heated rocks. Baked, humid air and burning incense smell blended into the atmosphere, which was feverish and earthy.
"39 and 41. Stargazing at Starlink by Lizzie Lister. Standing outside the halfway house, we stare upwards. Frederick saw them first. Pearls of light parading above us, a perfect line, like someone had pricked the night sky with a fork. They have sent an army of constellations to fence off the pole star. We no longer need the stars to navigate at night. Now we have Google. Soon, there will be 50,000 to mock the Milky Way, a candle for each pollution death, satellite angels lighting our way home. What price do we pay for connectivity, for joining the dots? We watch the unstoppable clockwork dance. The night air hangs cold. We're shivering. I'm angry, afraid. When we were kids, a man lived on the scrap heap at Bake. We called him King Arthur. He invented a machine to disrupt the radar of planes. I long for his brains, his passion, his maverick ability to throw invisible spears. I'd take them out, one by one, imagining myself an owl, a bat, a secret night mammal wondering with bewilderment at the marching stars. I met a man who said the day would come when silver magnets enclose the earth. Bees would fall from the sky. Robins lose their ability to navigate by quantum forces. I am no expert. I do not know the truth. Look up. Look there, says Frederick. We watch the firmament of the night puncture, like perforated paper waiting to be torn in two. 41, The Mirror by David Underdone. For years it seems you must have been in black and white, hiding down in Cornwall in tiny photographs, or up in Llandudno, or cooking those Sunday dinners with Yorkshire that so often seem to end in tears. But then you bought brushes and pastels and shared that summer stall through festival week. Those framed Cotswold churches snug in their villages gave us no warning of the years to come. After you discovered everything is light. It was all about colour, you said, though the jugs and the bowls of fruit you brought to wonky life never prepared us for the mirror. And how for a year or more you turned yourself inside out in paint on canvases you did not show your family. Stacked up in that bedroom studio where your heart had gone to live were life-size heads in slabs of paint there was no arguing with. You didn't give a fig they went for hanging in the sitting room or what we'd do with them. And afterwards, They gazed at us for months, defying all our plans to clear the house. I have one still, on the hall wall, held in its place by landscapes either side, though I know it was never all about colour.
Poem number 38, Some Mate for Life, by Julian Turner. Thanks for your letter. Is it really 10 years since we met? It seems like yesterday. You on Port Meadow in your daffodil dress with its distinctive markings. Our passion in the thick fug of evergreen Leylandii. Then luncheon in the Trout. I have to say, silk stockings still remind me of your knees. All courtships follow their own protocol, ours too. We both knew one wrong footfall would be lethal. We avoided prescribed zones, kept to prescribed rituals, visual display, touch, vibration, and the surge of pheromones. We were all over by the end of lunch. The world misunderstands our sort. The darlings haven't got a clue about such things. In fact, it's rare for fit males who are dating to throw themselves onto the fangs of Ajukwee, who may start eating him while they're mating. I'm grateful this has not occurred to me. It's all so dreamy. I recall your palps, languorous and svelte. Could I forget the way you held yourself rigid, your small gulps, the way the burrs adhered to your long limbs, your dark hairs standing to the touch of wind, the way you seemed to thrum? I can still see it. I had to move from Oxford years ago. There are no soulmates here. I hope I can confess to you, who I still feel I know, the bald verbs of my midlife, fuck and eat, and in between a narrowing horizon, a sharper focus where the two words meet like friends who have been parted for too long. Poem number 46. You Cut My Hair, by Keith Chandler. First shorn, Samson-like of my shoulder lengths, such 60s stuff. All through our years of adult growing up, worry about the kids, the job, the house, you snipped and primped to make me look half pleasant, fit for work. Smiling at the angel wing of frost as it brushed my beard, each tree-ringed spring put out more greying blossom for the birds. Now, a phrenologist, you see by touch each bump and sag. Tenderly, you ease my glasses off to trim over the ears. Though, as we both know, you can lose your rag. Sit still, or you'll get these scissors in your neck. You've shown over some 50 years fingertip care. None knows like you my vain attempts at autumn tints, or when the comb-over became a monkish crop, or how hair haywires from the nose long after it has fizzled from the top. Now what is left barely tickles the nape. In a round mirror opposite, I see myself, a balding, towel-bibbed babe, lensed in the snow globe of your love, a few last fluttery wisps. Head locked and angle posed to get a closer look, feeling the raw snape of a razor at my neck, head Baptist bowed, I bless my fate.
'43 and '44, Tightrope by Elizabeth Rowe. She walks a tightrope, slung between before and after, knows he is more than the harm that he has done. Her heart is a crowded album of his yesterdays, his arms lifted to hers, his first steps, his school blazer too big for him, and later his homecoming, a bearded wanderer with a fierce light in his eye. She asks herself if she loved him too much, possibly, or not enough. Knows that the world is unforgiving as the harm flows onwards, outwards, swallowing both innocent and guilty. She will save pages in the album for his tomorrows, while he walks a tightrope slung between retribution and redemption. Toucans in Tutus by Steve Layton. Two canoodling toucans sit pretty in a tree. We're looking out across the land to see what they might see. Two tutus, the two toucans spied, are blowing in the breeze. Two ballyskirts, that's right, as white as Cheshire cheese. From where they came, there is no knowing, but this poem knows where they are going. And when, at the time of the clock's two hands, these tutus will meet with our two toucans. At 2:45, each caught a tutu. As it drifted through the air, they donned their tutus, saying, "What a to-do, and aren't we a handsome pair?" It may not be too true, but I once heard it tell that toucans in tutus can dance very well. They favour the can-can, not one can, but two. And who can resist what two toucans can do? Together they can most elegantly. If two toucans can, can we?
'42 and '45. 42, The Vase of 100 Birds by Joe Haslam. They could have been crows shearing off from the fields, peewits coursing the winter sky, swans with necks twined, but more likely cranes, in a repeat with petal and leaf. Though the only one we saw that day was a blackbird through the high window of the museum, dipping his beak to a pool of clear water. How the drops arced and gleamed. I thought of the hands of the potter round the cool clay, spinning his crane into flight, light bones and keeled sternum yearning for sky. How each bird leans to curve in its own way. Dove from the sleeve, and the dove come back. That one set free by Matisse from a sheet of blue paper, then a new one released with each turn of the wrist, until they're numberless, till they're one curve and one bird, plover and chaffinch, dunnock and swift, the blackbird, his yolk-yellow beak. And 45, and last, Unlearning by Peggy McCarthy. During thick, sticky days, we trapped bumblebees in jam jars crammed with flower heads and leaves, scented tangles of rose, honeysuckle, and woodbine that dusted our fingers and powdered our nose. We held globes of summer in our hands. We stalked the dense hedge, foraging, our hands and eyes sharp as scorpion pincers, primed and ready to nip. The thrill was the capture of a fat, furry one, its body a ball of buzzing wing beats in our grasp. We scrambled to ogle and own the burning heart of summer. And I'm startled now to know what I've unlearned, what I then knew about the ease of letting go.
That brings us to the end of our reading of the short list. Somebody said, I think, no poem can become a good poem until it's been read by you at least twice. Well, here today we have had read most beautifully, I think, by our three readers, the poems once each. Thank you very much, our readers, and thank you very much, our shortlisted poets, for producing such a wonderful list of poems for us this year. Thank you. We'll now have a short break for 10 or 15 minutes so that people can go and get a drink or whatever, and then we will come back for the prize giving. If we can be back in our seats by, say, 4 o'clock, that would be splendid. Thank you very much. Good. Now we come to the next stage, which is the prize giving. For the three competitions that haven't yet had their prizes awarded. The open poetry, the short story, and the book for children. Well, our judges will speak in turn, starting with the poetry one. Boridel will speak to the poetry competition, and then announce the prizes in reverse order, 3, 2, 1, and the local prize, the Hilly Cansdale Prize. If any of the authors are here, and I think one or two of them are, regrettably we can't ask you up to the stage because of the COVID social distancing and so on, but will you, when your name is announced, please stand where you are and make yourself known so we can applaud you. Thank you very much. So, to the open poetry, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our poetry judge this year, Boridel. He's both a poet and artist, graduated from the Slade School of Fine Art and has a teaching fellowship there. His first collection of poems, B Journal, was shortlisted for the Costa Poetry Award and the T.S. Eliot Prize. And he's gone on to produce two further much praised collections, all of which you can find on sale at the Waterstones bookshop. He holds a post as a writer and artist both at the Bluescoat, Liverpool, and at Trinity College, Cambridge. So we're very pleased to welcome Boridel.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. It's so special to be somewhere with people, celebrating something after so many months on our own in various places, but also welcome to those who are with us in many other places. And I suppose it's been an extraordinary reminder of how connected we can be. And I think for me, one way of being connected is through poetry, and to open a book is to open into a world of voice. And it's been amazing to hear the poems read today. And there I was wondering, my gosh, have I chosen the right? Because there were so many poems that could have won. I think that's been my experience of reading the shortlist, that there's a kind of extraordinary variety, there's innovation, there's technique and craft all working in different ways and surprising ways. And it was a very pleasurable but very difficult process in terms of making a choice, because to say that there's a winner is to somehow pretend that others are excluded. But actually what I want to say is that all those that I read I really enjoyed, and have actually a number of the poems really have stayed with me and occupy me in a way. So I think the poems that I've chosen, for me, if there's any criteria, it was that there was a kind of And this criteria seemed to evolve through the process of reading these poems. It would be different for a different group of poems, I think. That there was a kind of architecture or geometry that I felt I could sort of see the poem as, and that stayed with me. There are many poems that contained extraordinary lines and images and concepts and voice, but there's something about this geometry where it sort of not reduces but encapsulates a world in that, and that the voice holds this shape. So working in reverse order, first there's the Hilly Cansdale Prize for a local poem and local poet. And Hilly Cansdale, it should be said, was a wonderful poet and a wonderful person, and who I believe won the local prize many times herself. And so there's a wonderful legacy here. So this poem is, I think, there's something to say about a poem being read, not just written in a specific time, but read in a specific time. And I think reading this poem, for me, was a reminder of how there's a great sense of fullness in being just what we are and being where we are. And when the horizons of the world are reduced in a way, that isn't necessarily a lessness, but there's something there which is consolidated and whole and wholesome. And I like this poem because it takes us into the intimate space, an interior, and it's very hard to meet friends and family in interiors at the moment. So for the local and Hilly Cansdale Prize for the local poet goes to Lights Out by Roger Adams. So well done and congratulations. Moving on to the open, the categories third, second, and first prizes in the Wells Open Poetry. This poem, third prize. Again, I like this because it's a sort of meta poem. It's a poem about the poetic encounter. It's about meeting the poetic voice and about a relationship with that forms, and it holds a change over time, and it does something clever there. I think I think the three poems that I'm going to mention now, they all have this kind of swerve or turn, where the kind of attention is changed suddenly, and you feel something very different. And yet it's almost like that kind of Proustian sense of time where the portrait exists across times and spaces and it's held intact. And I think for me this does that. And so the third prize goes to Orpheus in the Classroom by Elizabeth Porter. So congratulations. And this poem is for second prize is I think there's a concision here. It's held very tightly and a very beautiful architecture that it turns about, and it's very balanced and poised. And I think where this poem was for me, it seemed to choose itself. It was really to do with this kind of very tight, clear setting, and I think a sort of symmetry and a balance, and it turns through time very beautifully in this way, and turns the poise and the perspective on time and relationship in such a lovely way, and it's also including others, much as the last poem, the Orpheus poem, it includes its community. And I think maybe the time of reading as now, when we've been in our various corners, to sense that a voice can include community for me was was very touching. And so the second prize goes to Restoring Our Parents' Grave by Stephen Lloyd. So congratulations, Stephen. And last but not least, I loved what this poem was doing in drawing all the kind of, in a way, the kind of, use a sort of heavy word here, but cosmic kind of magic and the sort of spell, the sort of innocence and spellbound experience of the beginnings of a relationship, and drawing it right through to a last sort of, not the last moment, but actually what it does is defies what we might see as a last moment, and a form of grief becomes a kind of a celebration in continuity with a long journey, and I just loved the kind of the relish in detail, that the details were real, that they came in a very lived way, and they lived through the voice, and that again, the voice includes the reader. It's a very generous voice. And so the first prize, the first place, goes to A Familiar Path by Maggie Wadey. So thank you very much to Maggie and to all of the other poets. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Congratulations to our winners and indeed all those on the short list. Sean, thank you very much for the clear amount of trouble you've taken to get engaged with these poems, and I hope our poets and all of those listening will take encouragement from his detailed and thoughtful analysis of them. That brings us, therefore, to the end of that competition, and we now come to the short story competition. And I'm delighted to welcome Duncan Mitchell to speak to us on the short story entry and announce the three prize winners and the winner of the Wyvern Prize, which is for the local best short story. And again, if there are any winners here, perhaps they will stand when announced, and we can applaud them personally. Duncan is a senior producer at the BBC Radio, much engaged in producing radio stories. He's edited a number of short story anthologies, including two telling stories for the BBC short fiction. He's got a particular interest in walking and writers with literary connections with walking, as in his book Beneath Our Feet. So please welcome Duncan Mitchell for the short story competition.
Good afternoon, everyone in Wales, and hello to everybody else in the rest of the world, wherever you are. Well, you're in lots of places. First of all, it was a delight, a pleasure, and a tough assignment to choose the four winners, if we're going to call them winners. I'd like to thank Wells for inviting me, and especially Jenny Smith. And I suspect I was invited to do the choosing because, yes, I spent quite a lot of time, I'm not at the BBC anymore, but I spent quite a lot of time at the BBC happily commissioning and producing short stories for Radio 3 and Radio 4. And what I remember when I first got the job there, I was taken aside and I was told in no uncertain terms what makes a good short story. Obviously, it's a given, it has to be very well written, has to be fluent, economic, concise, and it should also have a beginning, a middle, and an end, with preferably a sting in the tail, which is fine if you like the work of Somerset Maugham or someone like that. But there are other various ways that short stories work. I mean, obviously, they can just be a fragment, often a poetic moment. You can just dip into a life and come out of that life again. You can be transported somewhere else, lyrically, with punch, with toughness, with grit, and with beauty as well. So in other words, it's not just the beginning, the middle, and the end. It is a fragment, it is a moment. And I think both types of stories I found in the 20-odd stories I read for the shortlist. And yes, it was very enjoyable, and it was a tough assignment as well, because the standard of writing was high, and people had a serious purpose. They were taking their pieces of work seriously, you could tell. So after much umming and ahhing and dillying and dallying, I got to my 4 winners, really. And for the local winner, it wasn't actually a locally based story, and it wasn't full of locally based characters. It really moved between Ireland, Leicester, and I suspect London or somewhere else. And it had an honesty about it. It didn't have a necessarily beginning, a middle, and an end. It had a structure, but it had an honesty and a wryness about it. And I felt I was being spoken to, rather than the words were just being written at me. And all those qualities were found in a piece called The Price of Feet by Simon Heathcote. So well done, Simon, for the local winners' prize. I won't say in 3rd place, but number 3 was surprising. Well, I don't know if it is surprising, perhaps it is. It was the only story that addressed itself to the concerns of today in the world we're immediately living in. It was recollections from, the word was never mentioned, but it was obvious. Recollections from a COVID ward, probably. Somebody finding it hard to breathe in her bed, was cast back in time. It went back sort of 40 or 50 years, and you had the recollections of a marriage, really. It was very, very well written, and it had a lovely structure to it. I think out of all the story, it was the one with the best shape and the best structure. Again, I felt the piece was addressing me as I read it, and again, those qualities make up Waving Back by Rosemary Gilding. Well done. So for the second piece, I wanted something totally different, and I found it in a piece that was fun and quite cheeky, a bit irreverent, but it had a truth at the center of it. It was basically about what happens when you get a best-selling book of poetry. How does the world go mad for it? And this best-selling book was written by 3 anonymous contributors. And of course, they're immaculately laid plans about making this book sell very well in the rest of the world. The plans are completely waylaid because human nature, the human condition, gets in the way, and it ends up in a rather funny and droll punch-up, literally and metaphorically. You'll find all that in a piece called We Are the Poet by Jeremy Galgott. Well done, Jeremy. And number 1, this year's first short story for the Short Story Prize 2020. I immediately thought this was the winner, and then earlier today, I haven't read it for about a month, but my convictions stayed strong. And then earlier this week, a film came out with Kate Winslet in it, and it's getting 5 stars everywhere. And it has exactly the same title. So I thought, yes, things are aligning, and my choice is true. It was only 1,500 words long. It completely disregards the sort of Somerset Maugham principle of a beginning, a middle, and end. It's simply two women coming together. One's a schoolmistress, one's a former pupil, and reminiscing about the past when she was the teacher and she was the pupil. And then in the final line, there's a marvelous, punchy, damning moment. But yes, it was only 1,500 words long, and it didn't get me there so much, i.e. the technique and everything. It got me more there, specifically to do with the mood, and, you know, a slight lump in the throat as well. And yeah, the appeal is, you know, all over the place, but it was definitely there more. So I'd like to say very well done to Rolf Venner for his piece, Ammonites. It just completely transformed me, and it's amazing what you can do with 1,500 words, so very well done. So there are the 4 winners, but I'd just like to say again, great thanks to all the shortlisted writers, because it was a tough job, and I got there in the end with the 4, but well done to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan, for that, again, very interesting analysis, different styles of storytelling, which I hope gives hope to writers who have different ideas rather than a set version of it. The winning short stories, of course, are too long to be read at an event like this, but they are all available, the winning stories, the 4, on our website, or they will be shortly if they're not up already. So you can read them there in your own good time. That brings us then to our 3rd competition, the Book for Children competition. And in this competition, they submit 3 chapters or the first 30 pages of a book. Their choice is the author's. And that is what is judged, so it isn't obviously the complete book, because we can't read those totally through. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our judge for this competition, Fleur Hitchcock. She was brought up by the Chalk Rivers, Hampshire, where the landscape weaved the stories. She was looking as a child for King Alfred's treasure, and she read widely in children's story. The wonders of the children's world has never really left her. So after a commercial career and having her own children, she turned naturally to writing. I haven't asked her, but it may also because she was jealous of her husband, who is a toy maker. She obtained a distinction in her MA at Bath Spa and has gone on from strength to strength. You probably know her series of children's book called The Cliff Toppers. Welcome, Fleur.
Thank you, and thank you, Wells, for having me, because this has been a real honour and a terrific journey, actually, which took me up and down in every sense. I think when I first agreed to do it, I rather naively imagined that there wouldn't be very many entries, and that they might not all be brilliant, and that they would be shining examples, and I would be able to spot them, and they would speak to me, and I would pluck them out. But actually, what happened was the difficulty wasn't in finding good stories. The difficulty was in how to reject them. So I had this shortlist of 22, which is 22 3 chapters and a synopsis. And after about a week, I'd lost about 4 of them for different reasons. And I was also beginning to wonder why I bothered to write at all, because the quality of the writing was very high. It was very hard. There was every kind of story. There were historical, fantastical, there were dragons, dystopia, secrets, crime, spies. And the settings were schools, beaches, bedrooms, space, strange magical lands. There were some really brilliant ideas, there was some terrific writing, and there was some brilliant pacing. But in the end, I decided that the stories that would probably survive me, my test, whatever, were the ones that made me feel that they were real. And I don't mean they were in a setting that we recognize as real, but I mean real in as much as the characters would be real and they would reach to me. But it wasn't just the first 3 chapters that needed to do that. It was actually the whole synopsis. And the synopsis needed to produce a book that was satisfying and not too complicated. Because this is for a child, this is for a young person. They are essentially quite impatient in a way, and like me, they need to understand the story. It needs to be there. So I chose, there are 4 stories that get to win today. One of them is a local story, and I chose one called Mind Dump by Val Moat. It's a dystopia, and I'm not big on dystopia. It takes a lot to draw me into something that has rules, but the idea behind it was that you come up with a TV synopsis every day. At school, you sit in front of a camera and you pitch a TV synopsis every day, or most days of the week. And if you don't do a good one, or you don't succeed, you get deported into a lower social group. So this boy, Mark, he's doing really well, but his younger brother fails, and so his family gets sucked off into another zone. There's something of Brazil about it. But I was utterly drawn into it. I read it several times. I wanted to know how it was going to work, and I really wanted that synopsis to work for it, and it did. It resolved very well. So congratulations, Val, because I thought Mind Dump was joyous. So in reverse order are the 3 placed other stories, as it were. The one that came in third is set in a kind of almost Tudor London. It's for 8-year-olds, and it's rooted in the brilliant and very enchanting idea that the heraldic animals that we see, the wyverns and anyway, all of those wonderful creatures actually exist, and they live in a heraldic zoo. And the heralds, young heralds, get to go, the guys who draw the stuff on the shields get to go and draw these real creatures. So they can draw a dragon or a lion rampant or whatever. And so the young trainees come in. But what I absolutely loved was the animals themselves and Sarah, the zookeeper's daughter, who really loves them and really cares about them. It was a very delightful story. The idea was warm and funny and full of charm. And again, it drew me in. It had heart, which is what I wanted. And it wasn't terribly long, and it had a lovely simple synopsis. It was by Nina Hoole, I hope I've got that right, and it's Herald's Zoo. So well done, Nina. The second place was, it was on the absolute edge of what you might say is a children's book. It was quite hard, quite visceral, quite edgy, but I know it's what I probably would have wanted to read when I was 15, and that would probably make a great movie. It's called The Eternal Return of Clara Hart. And it's loosely a very extreme kind of Groundhog Day in which a young boy called, or a lad called Spence, tries to stop a girl called Clara Hart from dying, and he keeps on reliving it. Now, the bit I got to read, I didn't get to relive, but the synopsis made that very clear. It was very contemporary. It felt very contemporary. The writing was really good. And I was very surprised to find out afterwards it was written by a woman, because I really felt it was written by a man. Or actually, I felt it was written by a 17-year-old boy. It was a good redemptive finish on the synopsis, which is really important because that kind of story really needs it. So that was Louise Cook, who wrote The Eternal Return of Clara Hart. So congratulations, Louise. First place, and honestly, you know, the entries were so good, I can't tell you how hard this was. It's a little bit Dickensian in feel. It's maybe a bit Great Expectations. This time we have chimney sweeps struggling in awful poverty and hideous conditions. But it is much more accessible than Dickens. It's much more modern, and it has a voice of its own and characters of its own. Not as extreme as Dickens' characters, much more realistic. Tom, who's a central character, is a very convincing, 12, 13-year-old boy. And he has a sort of vague sense of unease when this girl, Alice, is sort of tricked into becoming a chimney sweep. And that way in which he is vaguely uncomfortable about it so resonated, because he wasn't passionately furious like an adult might be, perhaps, or like a child might be in a sort of empowered political sense. He was vaguely uncomfortable, and I felt that was very true to the way that certainly I would have felt at 12. There's something wrong, but I can't put my finger on it. He's bothered, and he has there's his horrible master, but there's this terribly cheerful chipper Alice as well. The atmosphere was great, the language was terrific, and the pacing was spot on, and the synopsis made sense. I have to say, I really enjoyed it, and that is called Winter's Boy, and it's by Barbara Featherstone. So congratulations, Barbara.
Thank you very much for judging those, and from her remarks you can see what care she has put into it, which must be very encouraging for our writers. So that brings us to the end of the three competitions. Thank you all very much for attending. I have various thank yous to give. There are a lot of people involved with this, all of them volunteers in the actual organisation here, behind the scene helpers, the technicians, the stewards, our team of shortlisters for all of the competitions, the microphone people, and above all, Jenny Smith, who does the most prodigious amount of work on these competitions. She basically runs all four competitions, always uncomplainingly, always willingly. So everybody owes Jenny a great deal of thanks. So thank you for that. And then finally, I'd like to thank our judges of all the competitions. Without the judges, it's impossible to produce this sort of series of competitions, which one hopes does encourage the writers of all ages and sizes to write further. We hope that next year we'll be able to meet under happier circumstances. Thank you all very much for attending, and those who are listening online also. We hope you have enjoyed your afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you would leave in an orderly manner, please, maintaining social distance and keeping your...
If you give money to the festival, They can help loads of local schools. Please give what you can.